Good evening to you again, traveller. It is strange how we keep meeting like this, but then I suppose you have simply come for another story. I see you are admiring the forest, traveller. I cannot blame you. It is rather a lovely place, just ask Henry, although, if you do, he may just correct you slightly. What do I mean? Sit on that stump behind you and have some cocoa whilst I tell you the story of the girl in the woods. The island of Sodor is surrounded by a beautiful blue sea, has fields of green and sandy yellow beaches. It has streams, mountains and docks where visitors to the island arrive. For Henry, his favourite place on Sodor is the forest, unofficially known as Henry's Forest, although he insists that the only person who truly owns it is nature. When Henry is not busy, he likes to sit in his special siding and watch the world go by, listening to the sounds of the forest. One day, after pulling in especially heavy goods, Henry was resting in his siding, feeling the warm sun beat down across his face.
There really is nothing better to do than sit back and relax whilst listening to the orchestra of the forest.
Just as long as there isn't any work for us to do, Henry. Remember, we're still on duty.
Of course, Alf. How silly of me to forget.
Hey, you two.
What's up, Marcus? There a job for us?
Nothing, I just put the kettle on. You guys fancy a cup?
Not half. Hang tight, old boy. We'll be back in a bit. We've got some urgent business to take care of.
Mind you don't eat too many biscuits, Oscar, or Gina might begin to suspect you of skipping out on your diet again.
Oh, don't worry, Henry. I'll make sure Marcus and I eat our fair share of the custard creams.
Henry laughed as his crew got up and headed for the signal box. After a while, the warm sun soon sent Henry off to sleep, but he was suddenly woken by the sound of footsteps and a giggle.
Hello? Is someone there?
Henry scanned the tree line and suddenly spotted a little girl peeking out at him from behind a tree. Henry smiled at her warmly, as he often liked to talk to people out for walks in the forest.
Why? Hello there. Out for a walk, are you?
But the girl said nothing and just continued to look at Henry. As he looked around, Henry suddenly became aware that he couldn't see any sign of an adult accompanying the girl.
Say, where are your parents? It's not really safe to go wandering around the forest unaccompanied, you know, especially as the main line happens to run through it and there are a lot of logging operations.
Suddenly, the girl turned and began to walk away, still not saying anything. Henry worried he might have said something to upset her.
Hey, don't go! I'm not angry with you. I'm just concerned for you, that's all. Please, come back!
Henry, who are you talking to?
Oh, Oscar. Oh, I didn't hear you coming. You see, I was talking to this girl here because I was a little concerned for her.
What girl, Henry?
The girl walking along the Wellsworth path. Can't you?
But Henry cut off as he noticed the girl was no longer on the path. He knew it was impossible for her to have gotten out of eyesight already, and there was nowhere she could have hidden, as the path entered a clearing that was devoid of trees.
Well, she's not there now, old boy. Anyway, we've got a job come through for us. Boko's stranded at Kronk Abbey because his air brakes have failed, and he can't move an inch, so we're to take on this train.
Oh, I see. Well, I suppose we'd best get to it then.
The crew climbed aboard, and Henry slowly steamed out of the siding towards Kronk Abbey. Later, Henry returned to the sheds and told the other rangers about the strange encounter.
And when I looked back, she was gone.
My dear Henry, there's no real mystery. The girl simply just ran off out of sight.
Gordon, I've timed people walking along that path. It's impossible to get from the siding to the clearing and out of sight in the length of time I looked away.
Then she simply hid behind a tree or a bush.
But I just told you that clearing was deforested only last week. I should know. I was the one who ran the trains to the sawmill.
Look, Henry, I'm tired. I have to get up early to take the express non-stop to London. I need every bit of sleep I can get, so kindly stop talking about girls in the forest and go to sleep.
The next day, Henry returned to the forest after he was done pulling his local stopping to Crovan's Gate. Whilst his crew headed off to the signal box to scrounge a cup of tea, Henry sat and waited for the girl to show herself. He didn't have to wait long until he got the feeling that someone was watching him. Looking to his right, he saw the girl looking at him from behind a tree again, except this time it looked like she'd been crying.
Oh, my. Are you alright, miss?
The girl just stared at Henry through tear-stained eyes. The more he looked at her, the more Henry felt she was pleading with him, as if there was something she desperately wanted him to do.
Listen, do you need help? You don't have to say anything. Just nod, and I'll call for my crew. They're over there, in the signal box, and they are very nice men.
Henry's words suddenly seemed to have an adverse effect on the girl, as, once again, she turned and ran into the woods. Henry just stared down at his buffers, fearing that he had blown his one and only chance at making headway with the girl. His crew soon returned and, somewhat oblivious to their engine's mood, drove him back to the sheds. Tidmouth's sheds were empty when he got back, the other engines not yet back from their own duties, so Henry just sat alone with his thoughts after he bade his crew farewell. The sound of an engine slow puffing and the turntable rotating broke his chain of thought, and he looked up to see Edward backing down onto the berth next to him.
Ah, Henry! I see you are alone. That's a bit of luck.
Luck? Edward, I don't understand.
Well, you see, Henry, the reason I say that is because I was talking to Gordon earlier today, and he happened to mention you were having concerns about a girl who's been hanging around the forest.
Yes, it's just she's acting rather queer. She never says anything and bolts into the trees like a rabbit the minute I mention anything related to adults to her.
Henry, I have to ask, this girl, what did she look like?
Oh, I'd say about 10 years old, fair-haired, and dressed in the uniform of St. Mary's School.
Oh, I thought as much. Nellie Dean.
Oh, do you know her? Perhaps you could have a word with her parents about her wandering the woods alone. I'm sure she's mature enough, but it'd make me feel...
Henry, that's going to be a little difficult to do. You see, Nellie's parents died a few months after she did.
Died? After she did? You don't mean she's...
It was a few months before you were brought on by the fat director, Sir Topham-Hatt I. You see, Nellie was the daughter of James Dean, the manager of what was then known as the Wellsworth and Sudbury Cooperative Lumber Company. He was a great man, deeply respected by his employees. Well, apart from one of them, that is. There was a foreman by the name of Hugh Garvey, an absolute cad of a man who spent every half penny of his wages on cheap booze, illicit card games, and women of the night. Two of his biggest faults were that he was always drunk on duty, and loved nothing more than tormenting his fellow workers. Dean gave him chance after chance to amend his ways, but eventually he was forced to give Garvey the sack. Of course, Garvey was none too pleased about this, and he swore he'd get even with Dean in the worst way possible.
I think I can see where this is going.
Indeed. Garvey learned that Nellie would take walks in the woods after school. Being the daughter of a lumberman, she was no stranger to being in the forest, so her parents felt she needed no chaperoning to accompany her. The day after he'd been fired, Garvey stole an axe from the equipment shed at the mill and followed Nellie into the woods, where he cornered her and hacked her to pieces. Unfortunately for him, a couple of off-duty policemen happened to be fishing nearby and heard Nellie's cries. They confronted Garvey, tackled him to the ground, and arrested him for murder. The tragic loss of Nellie hit her parents hard. Her mother shortly became ill from grief and passed away in her sleep, whilst James took an overdose of morphine. It would seem the event was so tragic for Nellie that she is forever bound to that spot in the forest. I'm sorry I had to tell you this, Henry.
Don't be, Edward. I feel better for knowing it.
Henry continues to visit the forest whenever he is not working. Whilst his crew drink tea and tell dirty jokes with Marcus the signalman, he sits and listens to the birds singing in the trees and the sound of the squirrels and deer running through the undergrowth. But whenever he hears the sound of children laughing as they play in the forest, he likes to think he can hear Nellie joining in their fun. And now you see what I was alluding to, traveller. Henry admits that the forest is a wonderful place full of beauty and life, but at the same time it also hides many a dark and tragic story. Ah, the clock doth toll the hour, and summons me back to my work. Godspeed on your journey, lonely traveller, and remember, be wary of your surroundings. You never quite know what they might be hiding.